By this point, when it comes to budget microphones, you probably know that I ApplaudMic the PodMic. For about $100, I think it's an awesome value for anyone who wants to start podcasting or streaming. However, even though it's only the early 2020s, Audio-Technica seems to be on the road to defeat Rode with the AT2040. And so today I want to put both these microphones in a head-to-head showdown to help you decide which one might be the best one for you. I purchased both of these microphones at their normal retail price of $100, and I've had the PodMic for several years. The Audio-Technica is newer. It's not a newer microphone, but it's newer to me. Anyway, right now we're listening to the Rode PodMic, and both of these are running directly through the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 and into Adobe Audition with no processing, no effects, no equalization, nothing. It's just as clean and dry of a signal as I could hope to get. And the reason I'm standing up today is because both of these are outstanding microphones. Just like the Scarecrow who got an award for being outstanding in his field. And for quite a long time now, the PodMic has been my recommendation for anyone who's looking to take their audio to that next level, get into podcasting, get into streaming, that kind of stuff. For a few reasons, it's relatively affordable. I think that it's a great sounding microphone. It's incredibly durable and well built, and it has some really awesome mounting options. You might remember me talking about this from other videos, including my full-length PodMic review, but I have several PodMics because I do like them so much. The yoke of the PodMic is incredibly strong and super easy to adjust, but on the bottom of it, it has a 5/8/3/8 inch mount just built into it, so you don't need any adapters or anything like that. And so for me, that makes this a great recommendation because somebody gets this microphone out of the box, they plug it into their interface or their mixer, and they're pretty much all set and ready to go. However, I'll be the first to admit that the PodMic isn't objectively the best sounding microphone in the world. I do think that it sounds good, but whether it's going to work for you definitely depends on your voice and your environment. It leans very much towards the high end, so it tends to lack some of that low end, which means you might need to EQ it a bit if you're using it with something like the Rodecaster Pro. It's pretty simple to just add on a de-esser, add in some of that big bottom bass boost, and then it's going to sound pretty awesome. I have other videos where I've tried to EQ it to sound like an SM7B and gotten it very, very close with just a little bit of equalization. However, switching over to the Audio-Technica 2040, it really seems like they're coming after Rode with this microphone. You can definitely see just a few design similarities between them, although a microphone kind of just looks like a microphone. But this is the same price. It has a lot of similar features, and it has a built-in mount. It doesn't have a super fancy yoke like the PodMic does. It does have just the standard 5/8 inch mount on the bottom, and it comes with an adapter, so if you're using it on something like the PSA-1 that has a 3/8 inch mount, you'll be able to do that straight out of the box, but you definitely need to use the little adapter. It has slightly higher output than the PodMic, which means you can maybe more easily get a cleaner signal, probably a little less likely to need something like a Cloudlifter, signal booster. Both of these microphones do benefit from using them with a Cloudlifter or some kind of signal booster, but as you can see right now with the way I'm recording this, you don't have to do that. I'm running them directly into the Focusrite with no other funny business or anything like that. And just so you can get some of the basic out-of-the-box sounds, again, this is the Audio-Technica 2040. Peter Piper pitched a podcast, how it rejects plosives, and this is the Rode PodMic. Peter Piper pitched a podcast, plosives. Plosives. I would say in my listening that they're about the same in terms of rejecting plosives. So as long as you're not projecting directly into the front of the microphone and you're speaking across the front of it, you're probably going to be pretty safe. But they would both benefit from a windscreen like the WS2 for the Rode or something similar for the Audio-Technica. And if you're wondering why the microphones look censored right now, it's because I may or may not have switched their positions, which means they may or may not be in the same spot that they were before. And this is a great time for a blind mic taste test to give you a taste of how each microphone sounds without any preconceived notions. It's also, with this extra real estate down here, a good time to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, which is Artlist. You probably know by now that I rarely do sponsored videos, but I've used Artlist for many, many years, and they've been always happy to support my channel. And so when I told them I was doing a series of head-to-head mic reviews, they were happy to jump on and support me, and I really appreciate that. Artlist gives you awesome royalty-free music with unlimited downloads and a universal royalty-free license, and the music you download is yours to use forever. And right now they're hosting the ArtGrid Artlist Edit Challenge, where you can create a video using Artlist royalty-free music and ArtGrid royalty-free stock footage for your chance to win up to $75,000 in filmmaking gear. All you need to do is use the link in the description to download your challenge kit, follow the guidelines, and be sure to submit your video by the deadline for your chance to win. And all the music you're hearing in today's video is from Artlist, and all of those background textures on the B-roll shots of the microphones were downloaded from ArtGrid. If you want to sign up for your own Artlist or ArtGrid subscription, you can use my link in the description to get 2 additional months on your annual subscription. So thank you again to Artlist for sponsoring today's video, and now, hopefully, as I've been going back and forth, you've been able to decide which microphone you prefer. Nothing has changed. They're both running directly into the Focusrite 2i2 with no effects, no processing, straight out of the box. And now here's the moment of truth. The microphone on my right is the PodMic, and the microphone on my left is the Audio Technica. Now, I did mention the use of a Cloudlifter or a signal booster with these microphones, and most dynamic microphones do benefit from using some kind of signal booster. I did an entire video on using the Cloudlifter with the PodMic, and in that video, what I noticed was that, and what other people noticed, was that there were changes to the sound of the microphone when it was running through the Cloudlifter. That could just be because the Cloudlifter might color things in a certain way, but it also might be that boosting the signal lets you hear different qualities of the microphone that you can't hear when without that, basically. For today's video, I'm going to use the Cloudlifter CL2, which is a 2-channel Cloudlifter, and that's so each microphone will be running through the exact same thing, and there will be no difference between them. However, if you're looking for something a little less expensive, I've had a lot of good luck with the Technica Mic Booster CT1, which usually sells for like $35 or $40. However, I would definitely recommend getting your microphone, setting it up, and using it without any kind of signal booster to see if that works for you, and then add it in later if you decide that you need to. So that way the signal booster doesn't boost the cost of your entire audio setup. So this is the Audio Technica microphone running directly into the Focusrite, and this is the PodMic running directly into the Focusrite. And this is the PodMic running through the Cloudlifter, and this is the Audio Technica 2040 running through the Cloudlifter. Very interesting thing to note is prior to using the Cloudlifter, I had the gain on both channels set to about 3 o'clock for each microphone. And after using the Cloudlifter, I have the PodMic set to about 12 o'clock on the Focusrite, and I have the Audio Technica set to about 11 o'clock. So pretty similar. However, there is definitely higher output for the Audio Technica. If I turn this up to where it was before, the 3 o'clock position, now you can probably hear a lot of background noise, but I can get really far away from the microphone and you can still hear me. This is uncomfortable. I mentioned the less expensive Technica booster, and in my very scientific tests so far, I have found no difference in audio quality between using the Cloudlifter and the Technica. So if you want to save some money and you need a booster, I definitely recommend. So now, depending on what you're using to listen to this video, if it's headphones or crazy media system or just your phone speakers, you may or may not notice some difference between the microphones, and running them through the Cloudlifter may or may not bring out some different qualities. And right now, I'd like to focus on why I'm running both of these microphones through the Focusrite right now, and that's really because it's pretty much the best and most budget 2-channel XLR audio interface that I know of, and it's very, very popular. And because whenever I run my microphones through the Rodecaster, which is what I use most of the time, I do oftentimes get people telling me that, of course it sounds good, you're running it through a $600 mixer. And I can tell you, after using both of these things side by side for years now, that without any processing turned on in the Rodecaster, there is no difference in audio quality between the Focusrite and the Rodecaster. The $600 that the Rodecaster costs is for other features like multi-track, internal recording, all the built-in EQ that you could add if you wanted, sound pads, all of those things. So I can tell you that the Rodecaster does not color sound if you don't have any of the presets or any of the EQ engaged, but just to keep things totally above board, that's why I'm using the Focusrite. However, I know that there are a lot of people out there who buy microphones like this specifically to use with the Rodecaster, so I would like to switch over to the Rodecaster so that way we can see what these sound like running through that, both with and without the Cloudlifter. So right now, this is the PodMic through the Focusrite, this is the Audio Technica through the Focusrite, and this is the PodMic running through the Rodecaster, and this is the Audio Technica AT2040 running through the Rodecaster. Both of these are on the generic dynamic mic setting with no audio processing turned on. Their gain level is set to plus 35, and the channel fader is basically maxed out at the top. It's like slightly below as high as it can go on the channel. And right now on the Rodecaster, it's giving me a reading of 15 on the broadcast meter, so This is about the volume I would want things to be. However, I have nowhere to go from here without boosting the gain even more, which is going to bring in some noise and some hiss. So it's definitely possible to use either of these microphones without a signal booster, but it's going to depend on how loud you are and whether or not it works for your specific workflow. I'm going to keep the same settings now and run them through the Cloudlifter. So this is the Audio Technica with no Cloudlifter. This is the PodMic with no Cloudlifter. And this is the PodMic running through the Cloudlifter, and this is the AT2040 running through the Cloudlifter. I don't know if you notice a difference in terms of audio quality. However, for me, the channel faders are now at halfway instead of being maxed out. I didn't change the gain, so it's still plus 35. There's still no EQ being added. However, now I have twice as much gain to work with. And since I did mention using some of the processing with the PodMic, if I go in and I turn on audio processing and I enable the de-esser, now we're going to get rid of some of those sibilants. So I can play with these until they sound kind of how I would want them to sound. That's going to get rid of some of those harsh sibilants at the higher end of the frequencies, but I'm an only child. I never had any sibilants. And if I go through and then turn on the big bottom, this is going to boost the bass just a little bit. So now I've added just 2 pieces of EQ to the PodMic. This is the PodMic with EQ, and this is the PodMic just straight out of the bat. And we'll do the same thing with the Audio Technica. This is with no processing, just on the generic dynamic setting. And this is with that same amount of EQ put on. So you hear the bass response totally different on this microphone. So that kind of brings me to my overall thoughts on these microphones. I think that they're both great, and you can't go wrong with either one. However, I do think that if you already own one, it's not worth switching to the other. Like if you have a PodMic, don't be like, oh geez, I'm going to throw this in the trash and now move over to the Audio Technica because it's going to be a world of difference. If you haven't yet bought your microphone, you're trying to decide which one to get, just go with your ears and go with the sound that you like the most. And of course, remember that your voice is probably going to sound different than my voice, so you can use my voice as sort of a baseline of this is what, you know, a nerdy white guy in his 30s sounds like. Where do you rank alongside that? And that might help you to make your decision. I can say after using these microphones for a while now and being very used to the PodMic and spending time with the Audio Technica out of the box has a more neutral sound. It definitely has more low end, and that's a great place if you just want sort of neutral and natural. The PodMic, on the other hand, leans much more towards the high end. It has more of that character. It sounds wonderful on some voices. It doesn't sound as great on other voices. So again, it kind of depends. The PodMic, I do think, has more character. So if you want a microphone that's going to sort of just have a little more character to your sound, I think that's the PodMic. And again, the Audio Technica, a little more neutral. I like the overall visual style, personally, of the PodMic a little bit more, but this is super sleek. I like the yoke and the mounting system of the PodMic more, but this is nice and simple and works incredibly well also. And the most important thing to remember is that it's all about your personal preference. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just what you like the most. Both of these are the same price, same build quality. I'd recommend either of them. Now, if you're still not entirely sure, you saw both of these and you're saying to yourself, Tom, but I wish there were more comparisons and reviews that you had to help me choose the perfect microphone. Well, don't worry, I got you set right here with this playlist of microphone reviews and comparisons.